Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to be here. We're going from one acronym that is on everybody's lips to another acronym that everybody's talking about, ESG, and we're looking at the infrastructure that we need to really make ESG happen. Now, if you've been looking at the media, you'll have seen that lately there has been quite a bit of controversy about ESG, and I thought I would start with a few different perspectives. So in the Financial Times recently, there was an article that ESG is beyond redemption. Now, there was such a good quote that I'm going to read it out. Born in sanctimony, nurtured in hypocrisy, and sold with sophistry, ESG is facing a mountain of problems of its own making. So that's kind of damning on the side of ESG. On a more positive perspective, in The Economist this week, there was an article looking at the top trends for 2024, and one of those was around ESG. It was the new energy geography. So they were speaking about the countries that are going to be green superpowers because of their access to renewable energy or the transition critical minerals that we need for the infrastructure to actually have a green transition. So what I want to know from our panelists today, from their very broad and global experiences, what are we seeing? And is ESG really dying, or is it just taking on another guise? So a question to all the panelists. Where do we think ESG is going? Is it dying, living in a different guise? What are the headwinds and the tailwinds that you see? And Jaleh, I might start with you first. You're the brightest and the other female on the panel, so let's go there.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I think there is truth to both positions. And I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. It's true that ESG is currently in a struggling situation. I would compare it to a patient in ICU, intensive care unit. But in ICU, you have the best doctors and the greatest hope. So I think it's going to come out of ICU, and we're going to see positive aspects of it. The headwinds that are mentioned in that article, I recently read something that was, the title of which was How ESG Died. And I think part of it is hypocrisy or greenwashing. Greenwashing is getting in the way of innovation, so we want to stop the greenwashing and really focus on innovation and move things forward. So it was politicized to a large degree, part of the hypocrisy that the article is mentioning. So I think we are now aware of these problems that we ourselves created. And awareness is always the first step to remedy. So I think we are probably, in a year or so, we would be on path to recovery.
Okay, we've got some great patient analogies there, so maybe on life support. Eric, what's your perspective?
So my sense is, I think in 2023, the era of naive euphoria around sustainability and all of us being a global kumbaya village, that definitely is gone. And I think there are a couple of reasons why that's happened. Number one, it's become quite clear in some parts of the world that some countries are more able to afford it than others, right? Thus bringing into sharp contrast this conversation around how do you balance decarbonization and sustainability goals with economic growth, affordability, energy access, etc., this conversation of a just transition. I think a second thing that's really also happened is this magical thing called interest rates now actually has a real value. And so that's causing a lot of investors to be a lot more careful about where they put their money. It's not just do it because it's good. You've got to make sure that there's a commercial ROI. And I don't think, actually, that that's a bad thing, because I think that brings the market discipline back into what you should be investing versus what you should not. And that may pave the way for a much more sustainable path towards sustainability.
Okay, I'm sad to leave the kumbaya village, but good to know. Forrest, what's your perspective?
Yeah, I really agree with what Jaleh and Eric point out, that in order for it to really work, it needs to go back to the economic model. It cannot just be a self-referring system. any self-referring system doesn't work in the long run. But then, I actually feel there's actually some tailwinds. There's a research recently published by Chinese University of Hong Kong about the price changes of green bonds after governments issued the climate actions. Actually, the average green bond price yield to maturity increased by 30 basis points after that policy being published, which means the market recognize the value associated with those green bonds. I feel that's a very important, very good first step, because we probably know that 30 to 40% of the carbon emission in the world is from the building industry, from the construction or operating of the buildings. But when you put yourself in a developer's shoes, why should you build your building using green technology? It costs 10% more, right? So if you say, okay, I can save some operating cost, but is that enough? If that's not enough, then not many developers will try to do that. But if that's associated with 5% to 10% lower financing cost for the developer, then it's worth considering. So I think it's really, there are some tailwinds, but we probably just need to gradually figure out the economic model behind.
Yeah, that's a great example. So you're seeing those headwinds really from those green shoots of the market recognizing the value. Emeda-san, what are you seeing?
Yes, my sense is, I think in terms of ESG, we are coming to the next stage rather than talking about the dying or stopping. As far as I'm contacting with the customers and businesses, actually, I can identify interesting warm-up situation among the businesses, particularly outside Europe, I would say, international major players. So situation is that Europe probably went fast at the beginning, and the rest of the world couldn't catch up enough. But last couple of years, they are really digesting and make themselves warm up. And actually, I can see a lot of interesting positive business talks in Asia and sometimes in the US. So yes, in terms of headwinds, we see much more difficult international politics and economic situation, maybe because of the new the geopolitical risk situation and so on. But actually, fundamentally, particularly economic foundation fundamentals, is going really forward rather than stopped. So I see we are now coming into the interesting pivotal point, which direction we are going to. But I think ESG is actually talking about a big transformation and also a long journey. So we should accept this kind of controversial situation, but I think the ESG journey is still really going on, inviting much more wider audiences and populations in the globe. That is my sense.
I think that's so true. Everybody does talk about ESG as being a journey, so we shouldn't be distracted by the minor pit stops along the way.
Yeah.
So Emeda-san, maybe staying with you, this panel is about tech infrastructure. What do you think is currently missing from ESG tech infrastructure? And what do you think you would like to see, whether that's across the E, the environment, the S, the social, or the G, the governance?
Yeah, I guess some of the other panelists may touch upon the importance of data or analytics. So I'd like to highlight a bit different perspective. I'd like to emphasize the importance of core engineering technologies. Again, we are talking about the big transformation, big social shift, which requires much more advanced core engineering technologies, such as the fuel transition and so on. So I would like to emphasize the importance of the core engineering technologies. And in terms of S, the businesses are really now facing also recognizing importance of traceability and accountability of the global supply chain. And we need to really evolve and improve that. And yes, there are already some digital-based interesting technologies there, but I believe we need to have more. We would like to invite much more active players' contribution in that area.
Yes, I agree. I mean, the ways supply chains are being reorganized and reprioritized is definitely having an impact on how we're looking at ESG. Now, Jaleh, when we were behind the stage, we were talking about you're from a life sciences background. Do you view this tech infrastructure a different way, and what are you seeing as the needs that we have to really drive ESG forward on that agenda?
Yeah, as a life scientist, I think I have a different bias than the rest of you and most of you in this audience. So I'm the odd one in the room. But when I think about ESG, I really see the great potential on the life sciences side. So if you think about the environment, let's say, stay with the E. I am in food and agriculture, deep domain expertise in that area. And when I think about it, those of us who've been long enough in agriculture and food, we know what we do has great social impact, whether it's hunger alleviation, whether it is sustainable agriculture, meaning reduced inputs. So you're doing the E part, but the social impact, the S part, is even greater than the E part. So that's my bias to begin with. But then it's far beyond agriculture and food. The impact that we are going to see from ESG, if done correctly with the models that we are talking about, considering that corporations are not charitable organizations, so they have to show profits. If you think about it, the drug discovery, as we go through drug discovery, the impact of that is just tremendous ways we can improve human condition, basically, and at the same time doing good in terms of ESG.
Yes, if we don't consider the human condition, we aren't ever going to have this transition because it is about how people change.
Right.
Forrest, what's your perspective?
Yeah, actually, this is an interesting topic because we are a consumer internet company, so we think a lot about the consumer behaviors, etc. So in order for ESG really to work, a lot of time we have talked about how to let people be aware and change their behavior, like you walk more and take less cars, etc. But how to incentivize that? We have a very small product on a small application on WeChat, which is basically measure the steps of every day. So say today I have walked 10,000 steps, my friend have walked 12,000 steps. And interesting thing is that you're actually being ranked with the other friends, your friends. So top 50 of them will be on the list, and you see, oh, today I'm number 5. Oh, I want to be number 4 tomorrow, etc. So that's a very interesting incentive system to encourage people to walk more instead of taking more cars. But we also talked about the idea of, say, carbon score for everyone, an individual carbon score, like how much carbon have I saved today. But then we run into the issue of why people need a carbon score. First, talking about the collecting of the data, that is a very complex thing. But even if you have the data, say if everyone has a carbon score, does everyone understand what carbon score means? And why do they want to be measured on that? And that problem we haven't solved, so that's not a product yet. So my point is that back to this infrastructure, I think if there's something that can help consumers to be more aware with more sufficient data, but very intuitively, not just more data, but very intuitively, that can help people to change their behavior, that probably has some bigger impact.
Okay, so more aware, but also maybe exploiting our natural tendency towards a bit of competition. See
Right.
if you can beat other people. Eric, what's your perspective?
So I'll talk about two areas. One where I think that tech is available but needs to be scaled, and an area where I think that tech is actually missing, right? If I take Ameda-san, and I like, as bankers, we talk about the real economy, and I use the example of the energy transition, right? Where we're talking about moving from fossil fuel-based energy to net zero energy. There are three component parts of it. There's the energy supply, there is the transmission distribution in between, and there's the energy demand, right? And when you think about tech stacks that are available here, they're actually critical. Because if you think about how a tech stack does optimization, orchestration, as well as reporting, these are tools that are available, but just need to be brought up to scale. Optimization is, for example, how you use energy, energy demand, optimization. All of these technologies actually already exist. It's just bringing it at scale. Orchestration, you can see within smart grids, right? If you're going to be jamming a whole bunch of renewable energy into a national grid, you can't have the outdated grids that we have today. You need to have smart grids that are able to level load, able to take as well as distribute energy according to algorithms, and reporting, obviously, across the entire value chain. So I think that's one example. One area where I think we are missing the tech stack is actually around nature and biodiversity. This is an area which I think the sustainability conversation has not reached a level of maturity yet. But thankfully, I think with the TNFD, it's starting to come into focus. But I'll give you a simple example. If we talk about biodiversity, everybody intuitively understands we need biodiversity. How do you measure biodiversity? Right? When you talk about pollinators, when you talk about marine system, ecosystem health, etc., we don't yet have the capabilities from a technology perspective to be able to measure, assess, and report on those areas yet.
So I like the life sciences bent that the panel's taken here. Very, focused away from purely technology. But given that we're here at the FinTech Festival, I thought it'd be interesting to delve a little bit into payments and what role payment systems have, particularly in the S of ESG. So maybe first, if I can come to you first and then to Eric, what are you seeing? What's the importance of the role of payment systems in ESG?
Yeah, sure. I think payment is interesting. The beauty of payment is it's very high frequency application. Just imagine how many times we bring out our wallet to pay every day. Because it's a high frequency application, there's opportunity for us to subtly influence people and change people's behavior. For example, one product that we have launched is called a cent donation. How it works is if you make a payment, and if it's above 5 yuan, and if there's a cent after, let's say, 5.36, it can round up by 4 cents so that the 4 cents can be donated to a project that you designated. It's very light because every time after payment, you have this payment confirmation screen. And on that screen, you see, I can round up 4 cents to pay for that, say, children food program. You feel good, you press, and then it's done. We launched it only a month, and already 2 million people participated. And we feel many more people participating in that program. Just a small amount, but we feel it is important because, a lot of time, if you set a very aggressive target, say like we building our bodybuilding, if we want to say reduce weight by 20 pounds in a month, it's so hard. You almost want to give up the next day. But if you say I only want to do 1 push-up every day, then it's very easy to stick around. So we think those kind of micro things on payment is especially associated with payment systems.
Yeah, I would love to ask more questions. We don't have time on that, but I will just flag that you've got the QR code up here. If you have particular questions for any of our panelists, please do start sending through your questions. Eric, what have you got?
When we think about payment and social, actually as a bank, we think more of the risks, right? Imagine back in our parents' day, before we had technology all over the place, the way your parents could lose money is someone breaks into your house, steals your television and whatever cash you have at home. Today, through the use of advanced payment capabilities, digital capabilities, deep fakes, this, then the other, we have enabled the criminal enterprise to industrialize stealing money at an amazing scale. And I think that's actually one of the things we're most worried about when we think about payment systems with social. I think we obviously understand the whole financial inclusion, bringing everybody into the financial literacy fold, but there's a dark side of it, which is for every tech builder out there and every financial services player, how do we run defense, almost to an offense perspective, on anticipating how all of these new capabilities will be used to harm the very people we purport to serve. Yeah.
So that is a really interesting perspective, and particularly as we go to the next question, which it often comes up when we're discussing AI about is it going to be used for good or how it could be exploited for negative impacts. So to Jaleh and to Umeda-san, I want to ask, what do you think the role of AI is going to be in ESG and ESG infrastructure? Jaleh, if I go with you
How much time do you have?
Very brief.
Yeah. So I am excited about AI. I do understand the potential for harm because I am a believer in Elon Musk. And if Elon Musk has questions about AI, so do I. So I'm on both sides of it. I don't know enough depth. I don't have enough depth of knowledge in AI to make commentary like the ones that Elon Musk says. But this morning, I was listening to the president of Singapore president, and he brought something very interesting that I learned a new thing, and that was the fact that as cognitive capabilities of AI are going to sort of penetrate the life that we live, the IQ would be replaced, the value of IQ in individuals would be diminished compared to EQ. So that to me has social implications. I don't know what the results would be, but I can see there's going to be change in balance of social stature and status and ability to have higher income and so forth. But AI, I want to mention that is going to advance life sciences in bigger ways than any other area. Drug discovery, advances in agriculture, low input agriculture. I think there are tremendous opportunities. We have to wait and see how they develop. But it's moving fast, actually. Things are moving fast.
Yeah. And as you say, great opportunities. Umeda-san.
I think so many comments and discussions are now happening around AI. So far, what I like as the AI description is something like this. AI is a super smart intern with a A-mark English language, but failing maths. So I think that's the simple way to describe the AI's potential and maybe the challenges. Having said that, I think AI can play a bigger role in the ESG. From the business and bankers' point of view, we need to support the customers, and we need to communicate with the stakeholders in terms of ESG. And the AI, I'm sure it can help us to reach deeper information and knowledge and experiences with much easier and quicker way. So if we can use the AI in a smart way, we can shift the allocation of our efforts, let's say, so far maybe 70–80% for the operational or clerical matters, and 20% for 20 to 30% for the real creative value-added actions. If we can use the AI, we will be able to flip the ratio totally vice versa. Only 20% for the operational matters with a huge support of the AI, and 80% we may be able to use for the real value creation. So that's what we would like to see in our value proposition and the product and services proposition to the customer. Because customer, in many cases, one of the big challenges is to identify the rules and regulations and also necessary information which they need to really understand to comply with when they do the business. So the financial institution, we need to clarify those things even when we lend our own money to those customers. And without proper analysis and assessment of their ESG matters, actually it's becoming tougher and tougher for us to maintain the sound lending business. So I think with a better understanding of the AI's real potential and challenges, I think AI can play a big role in the ESG area in finance.
Okay, so I'm hearing cautious enthusiasm for the role of AI. Now, so that you all get an opportunity to ask questions, I'm going to give my final question to all panelists. And this is taking a look into the future. If I had $1 million to give to each of you to invest in some kind of ESG tech infrastructure company, what kind of company would you invest in? Eric, I'll start with you.
As a banker, we're careful not to provide unsolicited
Please
investment
not take
advice
this as
that may be
financial advice.
misconstrued.
Read the fine print about do not take this as investment advice.
To be honest, I mean, Darren had told us she would ask this question, and I literally don't know where to go, because any area you go into is potentially going to be right or wrong depending on a number of uncontrollable circumstances, right? So I'm going to honestly refuse and gently decline to answer this question.
And pass it on to Forrest. Forrest.
Right. Actually, this is not my idea, but I saw this idea in a book I read recently called Life After Capitalism. It is written by an American author called George Guild. And I really like this idea he described in this book. Basically, we all know, there's a big garbage pack in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's the size of Texas. The idea is that any technology that can recycle these kind of wastes into useful stuff. And that useful stuff is actually graphene, which is a single layer of carbon atoms that is a thin, high structure, very resilient, that can be used in construction, in electrical conductor, in battery, in healthcare, a lot of different areas. So the challenges are how to produce graphene with a low-cost production process. And secondly, once you have that low-cost graphene, where to put it. So I feel that's like a ESG infrastructure level kind of project, because the utilization and application can be so broad. And the key is really figure out that low-cost production, which sounds like people are working on it and have some very promising results. So if I have 1 million, back to the question, yes, that's the area I want to invest in.
Great example, very real world connected, but also to the infrastructure. Jaleh.
Yeah, I would actually raise it to $5 million because 1 million doesn't
Let me
go
just
with...
check down the back of the sofa, see what I've got.
Yeah, so if whatever amount I have, I would invest that. As an investor, we do invest in companies that have impact, whether it's environment or social consequences. So I would invest in companies that have a AI-assisted discovery platform to develop biologics. And by biologics, I mean biological pesticides, because reducing chemical input in the environment for agricultural production is a huge, huge component of the ESG. We all want to see reduced chemical input. So I would do that. Not only it would reduce the chemical, it has impact on biodiversity by reducing chemicals. It improves the margins for farmers because they don't have to buy so much expensive chemicals, so forth and so on. I think that's an area that I think it would have great significance in ESG.
Great, another very real-world example. Emeda-san.
Before picking up some areas, I would like to highlight the fact that not only such a generous 1 million, but big money is now coming to the ESG area or green area. For example, SMBC has committed to make loans around 300 to 400 billion amount in 10 years. And we are not the only financial institution to announce such commitment. We see so many players to commit a big investment in the ESG area, through the direct investment or through the financing. And also, I could recognize core engineering technologies progress and evolution in some areas. And also, again, SMBC is one example, but financiers are now often talking about the transition finance, not the core of the green finance, but the transition finance to help the players to make a smooth transition to the real green world. Again, we will see potential big money flow in that category, which means in coming few years to 5 or 10 years, we could see interesting evolution or revolution in the ESG area, in more real asset term or more tangible outcome term. And so that I would like to see more progress in the, for example, core engineering technology area, or interfaces technology for the many participants and players to do a smooth adoption or implementation of the ESG framework. And the third area I would like to highlight is some technology to support the better governance, more efficient and effective governance. Because we see such a big transformation and shift, actually, the importance of governance will be much more highlighted. And it will be really burdensome and complicated, but we cannot ignore that part. So that area, I would like to also see much more interesting advancement. So those 3 areas, I would like to put such a generous 1 million, but maybe 1 million is not enough.
Yeah, maybe I need more than 1 million. But I think your last point particularly picks up on something that several members of the audience have raised, which is whether we have enough or the right regulation around ESG. So we're pretty much out of time, but maybe just a final word from any of the panelists if they'd like to make a comment on the way they're seeing ESG regulation go. Do we have enough? Do we need more? And which direction?
I mean, we don't even have good measurements tools. We don't know how to, as Eric said, we don't know how to assess things, validate certain things. So regulation would not be as useful when you don't have the metrics, the correct metrics. So I think, there is need for regulation, but we have to go the first steps done first.
Can I pile in on this one? I don't think we necessarily need more regulation. I think we need more orchestration. And what I mean by that is if you think about a country declaring that it wants to be net zero by, say, 2050, we need to be able to double-click that aspiration down to a sectoral level, down to a large company level, down its value chain, down to its smallest component, right? And that you can't depend on the private market to organize itself. So I think if anything we need more of is actually national level orchestration in order to make the whole picture hang together, and that's going to give clarity to the real economy in terms of what to invest in, and give clarity to the financiers on what is bankable or not bankable.
Clarity and detail. Well, please join me to thank our panelists today for a really interesting discussion on the ESG tech infrastructure. Thank you.